Well, hello, and welcome back. This is What the Story Say. I've been telling stories about my adventures in the Guyana Bush by way of the Guyana National Service. I look back on these stories and I'm really tickled at some of the things I've been through and some of the thoughts I've had. So the last time I left you, we were talking about how I was asked to be a domestic. A domestic in our village is someone who does domestic work. You're like a helper, at home helper, or you're like a servant or something like that, right? What do they call them in other countries? They call them domestic helpers, or the DH, right? So that is this new role they instituted at this place I was doing this national service. Mind you, it wasn't a role at all. It was created, right? To be at just about 4 or 5 females. And this staff sergeant had this brilliant idea, or someone. Like I said, a number of the girls, or all of them, had gone through this domestic thing, and they came back with tales about what's in the lieutenant's house and what's under his bed, and whatever. I wasn't interested, didn't care. Anyway, I ended up there. Like I said, the breakfast steak was taken in. I didn't take it. Lunchtime, I feel like the devil cast down to the earth with no place to roam. So I sat around the kitchen trying to help out, but that wasn't my chore. Eventually I gave up and I just sat on a bucket, and that was it. Lunchtime came. Well, at lunchtime, all the bigwigs, there weren't that many, but 5 of them, they would sit at the table, Bunta included, the one who sat up with his stomach out, and a few others. There was a really good looking one, and that is the one whose house we had to go to do this domestic business. So it was lunchtime, and they said, Corpswoman Baird, you have to carry the lieutenant's lunch. Now, a lot of people were around, including the big wigs, and I wasn't that stupid to be insubordinate at that time. But I was fuming. So I went to the kitchen, and there they had this huge platter, china, with all kinds of stuff covered down, things that I didn't get to eat, that my fellow GSA compadres didn't eat. They were eating the nice food, the good meat, nothing with high protein in by way of worms and weevils. So I picked up this thing, and it was pretty heavy. So I had to walk, let's say, about 10-15 yards, and I walked to the door of his house. When I got to the door, because the thing was so heavy, I couldn't open the door, so I kicked the door. Kick. I mean really hard kicks. And then I listened, and I heard a shower turn off. Well, I was seeing red, because imagine, I am this 20-year-old girl out of my father's house, sent to the bush for God knows what, to repay my dues to the government, and I am taking food for a man who is naked in his shower. That didn't sit well with me at all. So he turned off the shower and he said, "Who is it?" I said, "Me." He said, "Me who?" "Pauline Felicia Baird." Silence. He said, "What do you want?" I said, "I come to bring this food." Silence. He said, "Bring it in." So I took my elbow, shoved down the door, kick it a good little kick, and I took the platter in. People, if I tell you one thing in the man house, I tell a lie. I ain't seen nothing. I walked nothing beside a table. Sorry, I didn't see anything else beside a table. I walked straight to this table, plumped down the food, and through the door. Lunchtime, I went with my friends. I can't remember if I ate because I would have been so full. And but I was waiting for the hammer to fall. After lunch, nobody called me to pick up the lieutenant food and bones and whatever. Dinner time came. Nobody asked me to take his dinner. So I started to feel a little how. I think it was weekend. Yes, it was weekend. It was a Friday. So the weekend was coming up. And we didn't have to muster Saturday or something like that. I don't think so. But the weekend, I think it was Sunday, the guy said, let's go out to the village, and not much of a village, but there's always a shop and a rum shop and out there. Let's go out there and buy cassava bread. Well, cassava bread, they were so huge, like you put your arms together, huge. We used to call them dog blanket. They said the Amerindians used to put them down on the ground and dogs used to sleep on them. So we said we'd go and buy dog blanket. So, you got a little change, but there are not many shops that you could buy anything really, except, the drinks and that kind of thing. So the guy said, let's go. I'm like, okay. But in order to go, we have to ask permission to leave the base, to go out there, because sometimes the people outside could get drunk. And when they get drunk, they could be pretty violent with each other and with other people. One of them, they had a woman, I don't remember what they used to call her, Spider or something like that. One night she got so drunk, she just bit off somebody's ears. Yeah, bite off the man's ears. They had to come to the medic there to fix the ears. So that's the kind of thing. People leave arrow and bows and knives in the bush. When the fighting gets real, it gets real. So we were warned about that. So we had to ask permission. So we got up to the same lieutenant's house, and you have to go ask one by one. So I'm in the queue to go ask. So I walked in the door. There was a visiting person, a major or something. He was in the army, but he was a friend of somebody in my group, and he had just come to hang out. He was there that weekend. And so they were all sitting around, and when I walked in, I heard somebody say, "That's the girl Baird." I said, oh God, I'm in trouble here. So when I walked in, I said, good afternoon. They said, good afternoon. I looked them in the eye. I said, I'm here to ask for a pass to go out into the village. And the lieutenant said, so, you want a pass? I said, yes, sir. Silence. They looked at me. I looked at them. Each one respectfully. And somebody said, well, why do you want a pass? I said, because I want to go buy cassava bread with my friends. They said, oh. And there was a little bit more silence. And I could sit in a silence. Not an expression on my face of insubordination or anything. Because I knew my rights. I knew my rights. And I think that to have them be respected, I have to hold them. And at that time, my view was, nobody has a right to turn me into domestic. That's not what I went there for. I don't care what's in your house, what's under your bed. I don't want privileges. Just let me do the do and go my way. So they gave me the pass, and I thanked them, and I left. Monday morning came. Staff Sergeant come out. Good morning, Corps men and women. Good morning, Staff Sergeant. We can't say bunta to his face. She said, so who gonna work at the farm today? Male person volunteer. Somebody volunteer. Call my friend Basil London. He picked me. I never heard a word about domestic ever. That week, domestic ended. They never had it again, and nobody asked me anything. So I felt really good about that. But the story is not over. I think it was naughty. I think maybe it was very insubordinate, maybe. But when you come into a situation where you're not given enough to eat, your country is going through a dire situation in terms of food, and then you have to eat porridge with weevil and the same kind of food every day, you begin to do things, and it was unfair. So after a while, they had stopped that nonsense, because the guys in my group would get up and protest, and here's how the protest would go. When the lieutenant and the friends sit down to eat, some of the guys in our group would get up and perform. They would do a skit about everything that's happening there. And they would even make up a thing at the table where the people are sitting across and, mimic them and all kinds of stuff. Every midday, it was hilarious. We would put on this impromptu skit, mock all of them and all that kind of stuff. And they hadn't anything to say because they had lost control. And when they lost control, we took over. So we were trained to do agriculture, so that's what we wanted to do. Let us plant, let us do things like that. Don't give us the stupid kind of things to do. And so that brought us to the end of our stint in terms of the work department. The other part is now that you have to go back to the big main base for the passing out parade. Now, we couldn't do any weapons drill, and everybody has to do weapons. You have to learn to use weapons. And so we had to go back to this big Matthews Ridge place to do weapons. But in the meantime, what we were trying to do to show that what we could do was foot drills. And there's this guy who came to visit. He was a master at foot drills. So our little platoon, or whatever you want to call it, maybe had 16 people, if that many. And we learned to do fancy foot drills, like presentation drills with all the footwork and so on, to precision, very, very organized. So that's what we worked on for weeks. So when we got back to the big base, we could show this thing, and I think we did a really good job doing that. I'm going to tell you next what happened before the passing out and how I got through with the shooting of the guns. What happened there? I saw for a moment how handling of weapons can affect people very, very differently. When you carry your weapons in the military, what does that mean? What does that mean for people? I'll tell you about that in the next episode. So keep tuned and walk good.